Hello, welcome back again. I'm Pauline from PQW, and look what I've got to show you. I've been really thinking about what would be needed out there, and because we're coming into summer in Australia, and it's summer, in a lot of places around the world, I've decided to make a range of hats, and I've dedicated these hats to my husband Rob, so I've called them the Robbie hat. I'm just going to show you a few of the different shapes and styles that you can make, and guaranteed every time you make one of these hats you'll be able to create it to suit your needs and the person that's going to wear it. So here we've got one for a small child. Now I've constructed most of these, all of them except one, from cutting 1.5 inch strips from my stash. I've used all the one colour here to construct this hat, so you don't have to put a lining in them because it's double-sided. So a lot of fabric companies now are making honey bun packs for you, which are 1.5 inch wide strips out of a collection of fabrics. So they'd be ideal for making these, or cut your own 1.5 inch wide strips. Now we've created the pattern for them. In the pattern, I do give you different sizes for head circumference and the crown and the brim. You can make the brim however wide you want to shade the maker. Also how many strips to cut for each of the different sizes, but it's just a guide. It's not actual true to measurements because I don't believe there's a true measurement for our head circumference or for the brim that we want to make our hat to suit. So you will just need to figure out, using that brief guide that I've put in the pattern, to how many strips you will need to cut. But it's something that you could cut a few strips and get started with and then keep adding to it. So that's the little one there for the bigger child. This one here is for an infant. This one here I did make from a honey bun collection. So you can see I've got lots of different shadings of the range in here. Beautiful. And you can do whatever you want with the crown. You can make it quite deep. You can put the little peak on the top. You can have it set up. Once again, you don't have to line them. They're very durable. They squash up. You can throw them into a swimming bag. You can throw them into a travel bag if you're travelling anywhere overseas. Just throw it in your backpack anywhere. They're very, very durable. Throw them in the washing machine. They're just fabric and wadding. So here's the other one I've made for myself. I've made the brim quite wide because when I'm out in the garden I like to shade my face completely. I like the deep crown here so that it fits right down on my head. So in this one, it looks like it's one fabric, but it's a Chula Pink range, and there's 3 actual different fabrics in this. And I actually made this one from fat quarters because I didn't have a width of fabric, so I had to cut a lot of fat quarters and join them all together. And then I've based this one on Rob's Akubra hat. So for a man, you can just style it to whatever you want, shape it to however you want. I've put the leather band off his Akubra on this one. This one I cut my own fabrics for it. So there's no rules to it, it's just whatever works for you. So to get started, what we're going to do is cut the 1.5 inch strips or use your honey bun. So I've cut strips here. Once you get the required number of strips cut that you need to construct the hat to the size you're making, I do find that it's best to join the strips together on a 45-degree angle. Now, just do the 45-degree angle, trim it back to your 1/4 inch seam, press the seams all going one way. Now we're ready to get our wadding prepared. Now you can use scraps of wadding that you've got left over from different projects, but I'm a person that loves to use the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible pre-cut wadding. This is 2¼ inches wide. So what I do is I cut this through the middle. I just get my rotary cutter and ruler and I just cut through the middle there. It now measures 1 1/8, so it is good to have your wadding just a little bit narrower than your fabric. And this is how the wadding comes. So it's fantastic. And I know it washes really, really well and the hats won't stretch out of shape. A lot of waddings, just be careful that they don't stretch too much, because you don't want to make the hat and then it just stretches and it becomes too big. So once you get everything done, just lay your strip out on the ironing surface, the wadding first and then your fabric, and then with your hot dry iron, just slowly press. Now the wadding won't stick to your ironing surface. It's very light fuse, so it doesn't stick. If you're a bit worried, just put a piece of cloth or paper or freezer paper or something down there to stop that from sticking to your ironing board, but I never have any trouble with it sticking to mine. If you make a mistake and go off skew, just pull it off and re-iron. So now the next thing we're going to do, because when we start constructing the hat, when we start at the centre, we don't want too much bulk here. So what I suggest we do, and what I do, is I find my big scissors, here they are, fold your strip in half and just press that. Then we want to taper this down a bit. We want to get rid of a little bit of bulk for the first 3 inches. So we're going to do that at the beginning and the end. So we're just going to taper it. I'm only taking about a 1/4 inch off each side. Down about 3 inches is plenty. Now once you've done that, we're then going to fold the end in. Doesn't matter if the selvage is still there. Fold the end in. Then we're going to fold each side in till it meets in the middle. And if you give it a little press, it'll just stick there for you. Press that side in. Whoops, very hot. And that side in. Now, if you're not using the fusible wadding to let it hold, grab your bottle of Roxanne glue. This is brilliant glue. If you've never used this before, and if you watch all my videos, you'll see that I'm using it all the time. It's my most favourite thing to have on hand to help me get everything in position. Now we can just press that. Okay, so now it's sitting there really, really flat for you. So the next thing I'm going to use and introduce you to, if you don't already know about it, is the honey bun sasher tool. This is a tool I've designed to be able to fold our fabric at the sewing machine while we sew. If we don't use this, you will have to go along and iron all of this and then come back and roll it over and pin it and then start sewing. But if you use the tool, you're going to put it into the tool, up and back down. Oops, we'll do this way, up and down. We're going to pull it down about 6 inches. Just get this level here, pull it down about 6 inches. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine. We're going to fold this over and we're going to sew in about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Now once we start sewing, and I'll go to the machine in a moment and show you this, but a little tip on what foot is the best to use to do this stitching, you have 2 options. I find that a lot of people like to use the stitch in the ditch foot. It's not a favourite foot of mine for a lot of reasons, because this little blade here can get in the road when I start sewing through a lot of the bulk. I personally prefer to use the open toe foot that has nothing in the front. And what I'm going to do is move my needle position over and show you at my machine how I'm going to use the foot as a guide to keep me straight as I sew that 1/8 of an inch seam. But it's very, very simple process. It's going to take a little time to stitch all of this, to do all your straight stitching. Now, constructing the hat, we need to make 2 lots of, I call it cord, because when we're constructing the hat, the crown and the whole part here that sits on the head is from one set of cord. Then I make another set of cord for the brim, because when we're creating this shape here, we need to stop sewing and end it off and then sew the brim in a totally different manner, because we want the brim to stay flat. We don't want it to keep curling up. So it's a few little steps, and now in the pattern I give you all the information of how to create this shape. So let's go to the sewing machine and let's start sewing this, and then I'll come back and show you what we do after we make the cord. Okay, now let's set up the machine so this makes the stitching process very, very easy for you. You notice I've got the sew slip mat over the machine. It's got the big cutout allowing my feed dogs to be up. So if you don't know about the sew slip mat, this is the mat we sell, and I leave it on my machine for everything I do. It lasts forever. It's fantastic. I like to use a really, really good quality needle, so I recommend the titanium top stitch. Use whatever thread you want, a contrast thread, a fine thread, a strong thread, whatever you want to use. Use the same thread top and bottom, because remember it's double-sided, so just thread your bobbin up. You'll need a couple of bobbins filled because it takes a lot of thread. I use a tapered tailor's awl, and you'll see me use this in a moment. It makes it really easy to help move the fabric through. And you can see I've got this little piece of fabric here. This is my starter piece, because I find that doing this, it can get a bit tricky to get started when we start sewing this cord at the beginning. So I want to start sewing onto the starter piece first. I've got my stitch length up to about 3 because we're going to be sewing through bulk. You could use a walking foot for this if you want to, but using the fusible batting, I don't need to use a walking foot. So what we're going to do is just start sewing onto this. Then we're going to pull our honey bun sasher tool down like we had it before. Fold this over. So now it's in half. So this is where it gets a bit tricky. So just hold your threads. I've just got to pick the threads up. Hold the threads. And when we start, we want to be able to pull this through. There you go, it's just gone onto my cord now. Fold this over, we'll hold the threads again just to help the machine feed this through. And you can see it's bogging down, and this can be a little problem. So this is why I wanted to go over this with you. So I'm going to lift the pressure foot, lift the needle, just move it down a bit. Have your needle in the down position, so every time you start, the needle stays down. There we go, we've got started now. So we're just going to fold this over so the edges are level. This is where I like to use the tailor's awl because it helps me hold it all in place. So I've got the inside edge of my foot right against the edge of the fabric, and then I'm stitching in 1/8 of an inch. So now what we're going to do next here now is fold the ends in, and we're going to pull with the tool. That holds it all in place while we continue to stitch. And this will take you a little time to do, but you're going to have a beautiful result when you finish. Fold and pull down. If you have too small a stitch, it's going to take you too long to do the stitching, and you can appreciate now we've got about 4 layers of wadding because we've folded each side in and then we've folded over again, so we've got a lot of thickness to go through. So a good needle is very necessary. So fold in half, pull. If you've got any little ends sticking out of that, use the awl to tuck it back in. I find it's one of the best tools you can have in your hand at the sewing machine. It's like a third hand. It just helps you immensely. So there you go, you just continue to keep sewing until you get that whole set done for your crown, the top of your hat. Then make another set of cord for your brim. So I'm going to go back now and get you started on making the crown and just explain a little bit about the brim. So let's go back to the cutting table. Now, good suggestion, once you get your cord all made, wrap it into a little ball. You don't want it laying everywhere around because it just gets all tangled and everything. But to start the crown, as we've said before, we need to start with a little circle. I find it's quite tricky to go straight to the machine and start stitching that. So what I suggest you do and what I do is I start my little circle off by using the Roxanne glue basted, and I put little dots of glue along the edge. Now I've got the folded edge on the outside. Some people like to have the open edge on the outside. That's your choice. But I like to have the open edge is the edge that I'm gluing. So put little dots of glue, wind it around, and then with your hot dry iron just press. Now pressing it will set the glue. If you don't want to iron over the glue, but it won't stick to your iron, it doesn't make a mess on your iron, so don't worry about it, and the glue will wash out of the hat when it's washed for the first time. But what that's done now, that's going to hold everything together for me while I go to the machine and start making the crown. And what we're going to do is you could use that stitch in the ditch foot or an open toe foot, and I'm going to use the open toe foot. And I'm going to set my machine up on a zigzag stitch, and I want the zigzag to catch both pieces of those cord, either side of the cord. So I'm going to start here and I'll work my way around. And as I come out, I won't need any gluing anymore because my fingers are not going to be close to the needle. In here, if I didn't glue, my fingers would be really close to the needle. And as I come around, I'm just going to curl this and zigzag so that the zigzag stitch connects to both of those pieces of fabric. Then once we get the crown to the top of the hat, and in the pattern you'll see different measurements to get this to. Once we do that, I'm going to quickly show you how to start to build up the side. And then putting the brim on is very, very simple. It shows you in the pattern how to do that. So let's go back to the sewing machine and start sewing and start building up the shape of your hat. And it's not going to take you long. Don't have your zigzag too close. Open it up. Open up the width and the length, because if you have it too close, you're going to be sewing for a very, very long time. Remember, have a couple of bobbins filled because it'll take a fair bit of thread to do this. So join me at the sewing machine and we'll get stitching here. Open toe foot's on. I've got my little glued circle underneath the foot. I've got my little roll here. Now with your roll, depending on how big this is, I find it's best to put this over my shoulder in a basket behind me because I want to be able to control the cord as it comes through. So we're just going to start zigzagging. I've got my width set on about 4.9 and my length on about 1.8, but on your machine please test it to get your right measurements, and we just start sewing. Now I'm finding that's just a little bit too wide, so I'm going to come back to 4.5. Now as we come around, you'll just have to lift the foot a little bit to come around these curves to start with. And we're just going to keep it. It's just a bit fiddly to get started here, but once we get the first couple of rounds done, it'll be very fast sewing from then on in. So we just keep sewing around. Just keep your eye on those two pieces of cord connecting together with that zigzag. Just do any adjustments you need to. Now once you get that centre part of the hat made, and just get a tape measure and have a tape measure alongside you, because you know you might want this 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches, depending how big a hat you're making. But when we want to start building the crown, the side of the hat up. Just going to do one more round. Now, and we don't want to stretch this. If you notice, I'm running this between my thumb and finger. If I hold it like this, I'm going to want to stretch it and the hat will go out of shape. So just guide it through. You can see how I'm guiding it. Now, if I didn't have the slippery mat on there, I'd be having problems with this sliding. So now I'm going to start to build the sides up. So I'm just slightly putting my hand underneath the circle that I've already stitched. And I'm just going to keep holding it up and stitching. And you can see now how I'm starting to get that shape. So this would only be for a little tiny infant, this little demonstration one I'm doing for you. If it was for an adult, you'd have that centre circle a lot bigger. Now you just keep holding it up till you create the size of the headpiece that you need to fit the person you're making it for. So there's nothing hard about doing this. Just keep an eye on, if you have to take it from under the needle and measure it, just do a little reverse stitch on it to anchor the threads off. Try it on the person to get the head circumference right and go back and keep stitching. But that's as simple as what it is. When you get the whole crown made to fit the head, you would finish it off. So you will taper off the end like I showed you at the beginning, and you'll just run it into the previous row of stitching. Then when you start making the brim of the hat, you just come back and you start stitching where you finished, but instead of holding it up like this, it's going to be held flat like this. And then the brim will stay nice and flat. And just keep stitching around till you get the brim the size that you want it to be. Then when you get to the size you want it to be, you'll have a tapered end and you'll just run it off into the previous row. Very, very easy to complete. So just keep stitching, keep sewing, and you will get a beautiful, beautiful, one-of-a-kind hat made. And I think whoever you make it for will love it. I love mine. And I'm making for my grandchildren, make a man's style, make a women's style, make a child's style, and you've got a beautiful finished piece. We're just going to take this out. So you can see how now I've got this little bowl happening. So if I continue sewing that, I would have the whole crown of the hat made. But I just want to go back and show you a few little finer points to finish this off, and I really hope that you'll start to make some little hats like this and that you enjoy the little demonstration. But the pattern is what's going to give you all the really intricate things that you need to know about the starting, the finish, the amount of strips you need to cut. So let's go back and have another look at the hats. Well, now you know how to make the hat, and you know, as I said, any size, any shape, just work your way through it step by step. Just keep an eye on how deep you want this to be. You know, try it on the person that you're making it for. The tools I find are very important. Don't forget, I use the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible pre-cut wadding, and I cut it in half. The sew slip mat's very important on the side of the machine, so that it just glides. You don't have to tug and pull it through. Good needles, titanium top stitch needles. Get yourself an awl, a tailor's awl. I love the Clover tailor's awl, the one with the really pointy end. It's called the tapered tailor's awl. The Roxanne glue, very important. The honey bun sasher tool. This is the one that we use to make the cord. That will help you cut your time in half. And then of course the beautiful Robbie hat collection pattern. We have that available for you, and it'll give you all the information in there you need. So have a look at our website, www.pqw.com.au, and have a look at all the specials and the packages that you can put together to create this. We don't sell the fabric, but I'm sure there's plenty of places out there where you could get a lovely collection of fabric, or use your stash, whatever you want to do. So, and do subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we've got some very interesting other things there for you to watch, and we'd love you to subscribe to that and share it out and share with all your quilting friends. Well, happy stitching till we meet you next time, and as we say in Australia, see you around, mate. See you next time.